Hello, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome. And in the words of the greatest Premier League manager of all time, Unai Emery, good evening and welcome. I do that every time. I've got a really fascination doing
Can't blame you.
that. And welcome to a very special episode where we have the man, the myth, the legend. We will introduce him in 2 seconds. But first, don't forget the previous podcast that we released for you guys on Friday was a discussion with Jonathan Lowe, Mr. Redding himself, who has been a journalist with Reading since 2005 or six, I think he said he was. He come this season after 106 points. He come on Friday, discuss a bit about himself, and discuss a little bit about the game coming up against Rotherham that we all really predicted we would probably not do very well at, but somehow we turned on. But anyway, we'll discuss that. And also, this is coming to you guys on Tuesday, the day of the Blackburn game. But we're not talking anything about that game. We're just going to be talking about Reading. We're going to talk about his opinions on certain things as well. And we're just going to have a second tier Gobcast
Collaboration.
There we go. We're going to go with that. So yes. So don't forget down below, please do follow him, even though you may hate him at the moment, but we're going to make him love you. You're going to love him. You're going to like him by the end of this. But down below is a link to his Twitter page. I do a link to his Instagram if you want people to follow on there. If not, they just Twitter. No, he don't like you that much. No, I'm joking. Down below is a link to his Twitter page, so please go and give him a follow as well and get up to date with all the new stuff. But before we get going and before we get into all the football talk, how are you?
Oh, I'm great. Yeah, I'm great. Everything's going well at the moment. People seem to be enjoying the podcast, even though they don't necessarily agree with my opinions, which is fine. We don't want people to necessarily agree with our opinions all the time. That's the point of football, isn't it? We want to have a debate about these kind of things. So, by all means, keep on disagreeing with me as long as you're listening to the podcast and supporting other podcasts. And yeah, go right ahead.
And if you're going to and I will say this as well myself, and if you're going to disagree with them, and if you don't agree with what he says, and on this podcast as well, you can swear. I have like no filter, so it's fine.
Shit.
Yeah, there you go. It's fine. I don't black anything out, so it's fine. If you do disagree with him, just go, okay, I don't agree with you, but don't be a dickhead or be an arsehole to him. Just try and be constructive, and everyone has their different opinion. He has opinion, that's wrong. No, I'm joking. But we will get into that. So we want to talk a little bit about yourself. And we want to talk about you. So from the research that I've done about you, which I went into last night, is that you went to the University of Bedfordshire, if that's right. Was it to study? Was it journalism and media, or what did you study at university?
So I studied sports journalism, and that was with the eye of getting into, I don't know, newspaper reporting really. And I did a bit of work experience here and there at newspapers, and even though I love, obviously, talk about football, writing about football, it wasn't really for me. So, as I'm sure you're just about to get onto, I didn't really go down that path in the end.
Because I've seen that you've done quite a lot. You did a lot of radio that I saw that I've seen as well when I sort of researched you. Some of the radio stuff that you were doing at uni, were doing freelance paperwork as well. I think while you were at uni as well, if that's correct.
I was at the student radio station, and that kind of led to me just getting into radio now. So what I do is, every hour when someone reads the news bulletins, that's basically me, and going out, interviewing people, that kind of thing, really. So I wanted to get involved in radio, and now I'm a radio journalist. Ironically, even though I did sports journalism, I'm not actually doing that much sport now. Hence why I've got the podcast now to fulfill my sporting needs.
So you've done quite a lot from what I can see here. You're an ambassador as well at your time, I think, at your time at the university as well. And then you become a student manager at a radio. I presume is that the university radio that was there? Right. And then you become a freelance journalist and newsreader for KL.FM, if that's right?
Yeah, KLFM in Kings Lynn. That was my first break into radio, and I'm very thankful for letting them give me a chance.
So how was that? How did you find that?
It was all right. It was a bit weird actually working and reading the news because it didn't really feel like a job. And I think that's a good thing, isn't it? When
Yeah.
you're enjoying what you're doing so much that it doesn't feel like you're actually working and you're getting paid for it. That's not too bad, is it? So that was my first real experience, and that led to me getting full-time work, which was in East Anglia, same part of the country, but just a bit further afield over in
Yeah.
Norwich.
Kings Lynn, that's near Boston, if I'm right.
Yeah,
Is it?
yeah.
Because weirdly I know that it's because my nan used to live there. She moved up there for a time, then she moved back down. But I remember going to Kings Lynn. It's quite nice.
It's
But
all
then
right.
you went into broadcast journalism. I really tried just say to try and read what the name was of this radio station. Is it Seldor?
Oh, Celador.
There we go. Celador
So
Radio.
Celador are actually, I think, based in Reading. Well, they used to be,
Okay.
because Celador were the company who came up with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and
Oh yeah.
then the chap who ran Celador decided he wanted to go into radio,
hmm
and then they kind of went over there, and then they got brought out earlier this year, or was it last year? They got brought out by the company I work for now, which is called Bauer Media.
So I can see you did quite a lot during your time. I think the 2 years that you were there, you did the US election in 2016. You can see that I'm not right. Anyone that's watching it or listening or watching or anything, I have my research in front of me here, which is basically I stalked him and found his LinkedIn page. Which if you're not new to this podcast, you know I stalk everyone on LinkedIn beforehand so I can research them. So I can see, and as well that you attended a lot of the Norwich and Ipswich games when you were at the radio station as well. Before
Yeah.
you come into did you do a commentary role for iFollow? I think I see as well.
Yeah, so this was in the early days. Obviously, everyone knows what iFollow is now because we
Mhm.
haven't got any choice but to watch iFollow.
Yeah.
But during the early days of it, I commentated quite briefly, really, on the Norwich City games for the club,
Mhm.
which was an interesting experience. But yeah, there you go. And
How
then
was that then? Let's go into that a little bit because
it was
I was going to get into that afterwards. But what's it like? Were you the main? Because I think there's two types of commentators. I think the way that I refer it is the way that I learn it from wrestling. Is you have the color commentator, which is basically the guy that, or the main one where he has to describe everything, and then you get the one next to them that describe the moves and describe the statistics and goes over the top all the time. What was your role? Were you the main person commentating on each play, or what was
yeah.
your main role on it?
Well, when you listen to, I don't know, Sky or whatever, you've got two commentators.
Yeah.
You've got Martin Tyler, for example, and then Gary Neville.
Mhm.
Gary Neville's the one who's describing why
Mhm.
things are happening, and Martin Tyler's describing what's actually happening.
Yeah.
I didn't have a Gary Neville next to me, so it's just me
Oh.
trying to fill 90 minutes or whatever of me talking about what was going on in the game. And this was the first time I've ever commentated on a game. It was very difficult.
Mhm.
And I wasn't actually at the game either. It was very weird. It's hard to describe. So basically, I watched it on an iPad, and then I would basically talk over it, and then that would be broadcast out to everyone else. It was very odd.
That's very, very, very different to now, where you've got them in the stadium. I think now doing it. So
Yeah.
was that something that you wanted with that experience that you've done with radio and with that? Was that something that you wanted to go into, or is it something that you thought about doing? But I can see here that you went into newspaper journalism a bit more. So what did you not want to do the commentary side?
It was just something to do on the side because, as I say, I went into doing just basically news journalism. Really,
hmm
I didn't really cover that much sport, but I still wanted to have a sport on the side and
hmm
also to put on my CV. So that was basically what that was fulfilling at the time, really. And it was also a bit of experience to get into commentary because whether I do go into commentary eventually, I don't know. It's a potential avenue, I suppose. But it was good. It was good fun. I learned plenty about Norwich at the time. It's a lovely club, lovely place as well, and I had great fun covering them, even though they weren't very good at the time.
Yeah, and they've definitely stepped up since
Yeah.
then. So let's get into a little bit about football, and let's go in a little bit about yourself. So let's talk about your podcast first, because I think we all can agree, even if they don't agree with your views on certain teams, but we all can agree that the Second Tier Podcast is probably the best podcast around that's not bringing on the Premier League or
Oh,
around the
stop
world.
it.
No,
You're
no,
too
no.
nice.
Even club based. I'm not digging at anyone. Club based podcasts, are terrible. No, I'm joking. But so what got you into doing the podcast? Because do you obviously support a second tier team, I presume. What's the team that you support?
Oh, that's highly confidential. Please don't.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I support Derby, but I don't massively go on about it as much as my co-host, which is Justin. How did I get into the podcast? It was me and Justin. We had been saying for ages that we really want to do a podcast, and we just never got round to it. But then one day we decided, actually, let's just do this.
Yeah.
And don't regret it for a sec. We have only been doing it since it's just over a year.
Yeah,
And
July 2019. I found your first when you released. See, I have done my research here. Was where I found your first release of the podcast.
Don't listen to the first episode. It's cringeworthy in hindsight. But it's excuse me. The fact that we've only been doing it for a year and a bit is just madness to me. We said that if we managed to get 1,000 followers on Twitter after the first season and have 1,000 listeners, well, maybe even 500 listeners, we'd have been buzzing with that. And it's gone much better than we were expecting. And here we are now. I think we're most listened to Championship podcast, unless I'm seriously forgetting someone. So
no, I think you are.
Yeah, it's gone much better than I was expecting, and thoroughly enjoying it still.
So let's talk about your love for Derby, or that you don't go on about. What got you into supporting? Was it a local team that you supported, or what got you into supporting Derby?
Yeah, I'm from Derby, so that's the basic answer for that. My whole family have always supported Derby. Season ticket holder since 2005. So been going games regularly for as long as I can remember now. And that's it, basically. Followed them just about everywhere. Witnessed the crushing lows, the more crushing lows, the even more crushing lows. Not many highs we've had over the past few years.
Welcome to being a Reading fan.
At least you've had a few promotions in that time, and you've had a good couple of seasons in the Premier League. Derby have had one season in the Premier League, and we all know how that went. And then that's been followed up by depressing season after depressing season. But at the end of the day, it's all part of being a football fan, isn't it? And you could argue Derby have had it tougher than any other club who are still in the Championship over the past few seasons. But, it's all good fun, isn't it?
So who was your first, because I always ask this, who is the first player that made you really fall in love with not just football, because everyone has that one player. My love for football was Michael Owen. He got me into football, but he was non-Reading. The first Reading player that really sort of made me go, really, is Kevin Doyle. It was one of my all-time favorite, because that man if he got a concussion, he would just carry on. I've never seen someone just throw his body on the line all the time. Who was the player that you loved non-Derby, and who was the first player that you really liked as a Derby player?
I always liked Steven Gerrard. Steven Gerrard, just because he was an absolute warrior, wasn't he? And he was capable of pulling off something amazing, like a 60-yard pass or a screamer from 30 yards, and at the same time break another midfielder in two with a crushing tackle. And he was a leader, wasn't he? So I think Gerrard for me. I also like Thierry Henry as well, just because he was so graceful to watch. First Derby player is a tricky one. Chris Commons always stands out for me. He was about halfway through, really. From my initial time of supporting Derby, I suppose it'd probably be Steve Howard. Do you remember him?
It rings a bell.
Yeah, he was a big, stocky striker, a massive target man, and he was about as much of a target man as you could possibly think. Wasn't brilliant with his feet, wasn't very quick, but boy, could that bloke get it.
So, okay, then. So let's talk about this season before we get onto the other teams and before we go to reading about Derby. This season, it's been an interesting start. I think we could say Philip Koku, who in my eyes before the Derby game was probably one of the biggest, well-known names that's come out of Holland. I think you could say by what he did in Holland and everything that he got applauded for. What have you made of? And you've also got Mr. Rooney, who was the most bizarre, but unbelievable transfer I think I've ever seen the Championship club make.
Mm.
What's going wrong with you guys this season then? Because when we played you, when we played you the first game of the season, and
Yeah.
we could just tell that Reading weren't good, and we're not better now than we were then. But it just seemed that the players didn't understand what your manager wanted him to do, wanted them.
I think that first game, I watched that and thought, "Oh, Reading look amazing," and which is ironic considering what we'll be talking about a bit later on. But, the first game was atrocious, so I remember that, and then most of the games after that have been fairly abysmal as well. But the big problem that we've had over the start of the season is injuries. So we've been missing Martin Waghorn, Tom Lawrence. There's probably a few others I'm forgetting as well. Christian Bielik. Big players for this Derby side, and at the same time, players who were there were underperforming as well. So that's not been a great start. And then the players who have been filling those gaps, the likes of Jack Marriott, who's now gone on loan to Sheffield Wednesday, and then you had other players put in positions that they weren't used to playing in. So it was all. It was a bit of a mess the start of this season, and which has led to Philip Cocu being under pressure. But after the performance against Forest and the win against Norwich a couple of weeks ago, you'd have thought that eases the pressure a bit, and it should hopefully lead to all the talk and chatter around him potentially leaving the club calm down a bit. So it's not been a good start to the season. I wasn't particularly expecting a top 6 push this season anyway.
Really? I think outside of Derby, I always expect Derby to be up there because they've got the players and they've always got the owner is someone that I think everyone secretly wants to have, but then you don't want to have because he's so outspoken on everything. So there's a couple of questions I want to ask you. One about Tom Lawrence. Everyone's opinion of him is I can't really say that live on, not even live, just can't say it. What is Derby's perspective on him? Because there was more than one person that happened with the incident and everything, but he was the one who sort of got let off. So, as a Derby fan and Derby fans, because you definitely know a lot more than what I do, because you're the only one I know. And I've been to Derby as well, and it's a really nice stadium, but we got relegated there, and I don't like you lot. That was and I cried all the way home because of you lot. So, what is your opinion on all that situation? And has Rooney done anything to the club for what he was brought in to do?
I'll start off with the Lawrence one. Mason Bennett was another player who got away with it and avoided punishment that a lot of Derby fans thought maybe they didn't get, because Richard Keogh was the one who did get taken out of the club after his contract was terminated. And it is still a bit of a messy situation. I think the legal battle there is still going on. But from a Derby fan perspective, it was obviously very disappointing. It was embarrassing that this has happened. It was front page news, which
it was everywhere.
When you're a Championship club and that happens, it's got to be something bad for it to be front page news. It was an embarrassing incident, and I think the club just want to move on from it, as do a lot of Derby fans. Wayne Rooney, he's an interesting one because obviously he was at the MLS, wasn't he, with DC United before, and then when he's come to Derby, it's clear that he's a very different player to the one when he was last in the Premier League. He's not as fit as he was, and Rooney's physicality was something that I think went under the radar quite a lot when people talked about how good a player Wayne
Yeah.
Rooney was. So you can still see the quality that he's got, because his passing, his free kicks, he's still got it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just his body isn't as up to it as it was before. So you've got to be it's got to be pointed out as well. He's still a great leader, and when you've got young players like the likes of Max Bird, Louis Sibley, Jason Knight, they look to him and go, "Christ Almighty, we're playing alongside Wayne Rooney," which is I think is really important. But he's still very technically gifted. You've got to have question marks about how good he is physically now, and at the same time, I think that's had a bit of an impact on his standing in the team, because quite a few Derby fans have been saying they don't necessarily want him in the team now, just because when things aren't going well, and he's usually the one taking the brunt of the criticism, which is expected when when you're England's top goal scorer.
Yeah.
So it's weird to see him playing in the Derby shirt, but he's still a very important member of the squad, isn't he? I don't think anyone can deny that. His technical ability is still there. It's just his physical ability that maybe lets him down.
Okay, then let's get on to Championship in general. Let's talk about before the start of the season. Who did you tip to get promoted? Who did you tip to get playoffs? And who did you tip to get relegated?
We tipped Brentford to finish top, Cardiff to come second, playoffs. Oh, now you're asking. I had Stoke and Millwall in there because I thought those two might have good seasons. And to be fair, they have started to kick on a bit now. I think we had Watford in there. And who was the last team?
Bournemouth?
No, we had Bournemouth about 10th, I think.
Okay.
And I can't remember who the other team was. Forest, maybe. I wasn't too confident on Forest because I thought the hangover from last season might come on, and it has done. But I still think they might do all right this season. Anyway, yeah, we had a Brentford to finish top because I'm still quite confident they will go up automatically this season. Cardiff hasn't gone very well so far. They've only won 2, I think, so far this season.
And they're the only team to have scored against Reading as well this season.
Yeah.
And that was a dodgy goal as well.
they should settle down, Cardiff. Now they've got someone as good as Harry Wilson. He's a brilliant player. And then to go down, we had Wickham, obviously. Sheffield Wednesday, because we thought the points deduction might be a bit too much, but they're looking all right at the moment. And then Rotherham.
Yeah,
so
I tipped Sheffield Wednesday to go down because of the points deduction.
It's a fairly bog standard bottom 3, really, because if you had to get everyone's guesses on who would finish in the bottom 3 this season, I think everyone would have said them, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I think Brentford. I think if I remember correctly, I'm trying to make sure that if I remember, I've posted it on Instagram and Twitter and everywhere, so you can go back and search it. I'm just looking at where we said. Where have I done my predictions? Because I know that I come up with some mental. Here we go. That's the Premier League Championship. So I went for Norwich and Watford to be the top 2, and then I put Reading, Brentford, Cardiff, and Swansea playoffs. I put Forest 7th, and then bottom 3 I put Sheffield Wednesday, Barnsley, and Rotherham. I thought Wickham might actually surprise us, and Coventry might stay up, but at the moment, no.
Yeah, I was going to say. I tell you what, Barnsley isn't a bad shout though, because they've got in this new manager now, and last season when they brought in Gerhard Struber, it took them quite a while to adapt to the Championship, and this new manager might very well do the same. Their squad isn't particularly great. They've got a couple of good players, but there's plenty of question marks that you can have about that team.
See, with the thing with Barnsley as well that I found is I underestimated them when they come in. When we played them, when we beat them 3-0, I think it was in the end. When we played them, I very much underestimated them as a team. I was like, they're not going to do anything. They might do okay. And then the way that they played against us in that first half, I turned around to my brother who I had a call with, and I said, that's got to have been the best display of an away team that hasn't scored at the Madejski that I've seen in years. the way that they pressed, the way that they did everything. And then we heard that New York, was it the New York Red Bulls were interested in him. And I said, if they lose him, the manager, to if he leaves,
Yeah.
then I think Barnsley are going to be in massive trouble. So let's get into Reading. Let's discuss what everyone's here for, and let's discuss your opinion on Reading. But before we get into that, what I want to sort of go through with you is some stats. Okay, I went on a bit of a rampage yesterday, as you could probably tell by the research I've done. But what I did was yesterday is I combined Reading's promotion seasons that we've had in the 2000. I can't even find the bloody. Here we go. In the 2005 and 6, the 106 points that still holds the record. The 2011 12 season where the famous Adam Lafondra and Jason Roberts goals that was on I was on Match of the Day because of that. But that's so I combined it all, and I wanted to go through it with you and ask you some questions coming up with that as well. So in 2005-2006 season, the first 7 games of the season, so we're colluding the Rotherham game. We lost the first game, won the next 3, drew the next one, won, and then drew. We scored 14 goals and conceded 4, and we got 14 points from the first 7. In the 2011-2012 season, which I still can't believe we got promoted after reading this, was we drew the first game, lost the next 6, and then won against Doncaster. We scored 5 goals in the first 7 games. We conceded 10, and we were only on 4 points when we officially won the league. This season, we've won every single 6 out of the 7. We've scored 11, and we've conceded 1, which we've got 19 points. So then, if we go through that, we only lost 1 game in the 106 season, and then we drew the rest. So if you look at it, we are 5 points better off than the 106 season. We scored 3, if I'm right, 3 less goals, but we've also conceded 3 less as well. So if we compare all of that, how would you rate this Reading team, comparing it to the other seasons that we've been promoted in?
Well, the 106 team was the best Championship team we've seen, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So comparing it to that, considering I think Reading are still very much capable of finishing mid-table this season, not very much.
Why do you think that then? Why do you think Reading will still finish mid-table?
I just think the number of chances that Reading are creating is not good enough for a side to, let alone finish in the playoffs, no matter promotion. Mm-hmm. Over the course of the season, we've seen plenty of sides who have started off a season very well by scoring the few chances that they've had, and it eventually falls off because no team is capable of consistently putting away chances at the rate Reading have. If Lucas João continues to score goals at this rate, then he should be playing for someone like Man City.
He'll play for Wolves because he's Portuguese.
Good point.
That will happen. That will most probably happen at some point. I would put it against it.
So that's the main reason behind it, because Reading have had fewer shots per game this season than Wycombe, even lower than anyone else in the Championship. And the past 3 games have really solidified that point in my mind, because the Middlesbrough game kept out by a fairly average Middlesbrough team. The Wycombe game, 1 shot on target against a side who have conceded 85 shots so far this season. Not good enough. And then the Rotherham game at the weekend, Reading were second best for 70 minutes, would you say?
I've got the stats here against Rotherham. So Rotherham had 63% possession. They had 10 shots, only 2 were on target. 6 were off target, and Reading blocked 2. Reading had 7 shots, 6 on target. Only 1 was off target during that game as well. So going on your point there, saying about shots. So if you think about, let's go back to Jaap Stam's reign when he got us to the playoff final. That boring football that majority of Reading fans hated, but I absolutely loved. If you can't have the ball, you ain't going to score type of football that he played. During that season when he was manager of us, we only got a goal difference of just +4. I think in the same as well. I think Huddersfield that got promoted that season as well. I got someone who sent me the statistics for this as well. Where did he put it? I think he put something that Huddersfield only got a +3 or +2 goal difference record. Does it matter the amount of shots that the clubs are taking, or does it matter more about the conversion rate?
Well, of course, it does matter about the conversion rate because that's putting the ball in the back of the net. But at the end of the day, the rate that Reading are doing it at the moment just isn't realistic for it to continue across the course of the season. It's just not going to happen. So the best hope that Reading fans can have is that they create more chances, which admittedly might happen, especially when you've got the likes of John Swift potentially coming back.
Christmas, he's apparently going to be back.
That's a long time. Either way, Reading fans will be hoping that they create more chances because they've got to at the end of the day, because they won't keep winning games after having just one or two golden chances per game. I know the Rotherham game at the weekend was they looked better, but that was only because of the past 20 minutes when the stats really blew up. Because I think before that, what was it? I think it was 2 shots on target, and both of them ended up going in the goal. And then after that point, you could probably argue Rotherham had given up and just kind of rolled over, really. But at the same time, Rotherham, they may have had 63% possession, but they're a fairly poor team. And they didn't make the most of the possession. Better teams will. And Reading have got a tough run coming up in November. Blackburn in midweek's a tough game. And then, I can't remember who they've got in November, but it's some tough sides, some really, really tough sides. That will be the making of Reading this season. If they continue to get the points on the boards, then fair enough. As I said on the podcast at the weekend, I'll sit back and say, yeah, Reading are better than I give them credit for, but I just can't see it happening.
So let's talk about Reading's start of the season. So Derby away, where we won. Barnsley at home, which was a tough game, but Cardiff, who everyone would have tipped to be top 6, I think, or top 4, if you're thinking about it logically with some of the players that got beaten. Watford, everyone tipped them to be top 2, I think, if we're being honest with the amount of world-class, I won't say world-class because it's Watford, the amount of, and I don't really like Watford, so...
Premier League quality.
There you go, we'll go with that. Premier League quality they've got, we beat them 1-0, and let's compare the stats to that, where we had against Watford, we had 9 shots, only 4 on target. One of them was the George Puskas, beautiful Romanian bastard's goal. And then Derby away, Borough away, where we drew 0-0 against, I have to say, have you seen the game? Did you see any of the clips of the game or anything?
I know there wasn't much that happened in that game.
No. So it was a Neil Warnock speciality where basically the first half we controlled the game. We had the game, we were going forward, but we just weren't shooting. Then what Warnock did was, we're not doing well, let's take a striker off and bring a midfielder on. So then at one point, I think they were playing a 5-4-1. Where there was no way of getting through it unless you had 7 players up front. He went for that Wickham. Everyone agreed that was an awful game. But I think if you compare that to teams that get promoted, if you play poorly and win, that means there's a spirit in there that you've never seen. And Rotherham, I think people will say that we didn't play well, but personally, I think that was a masterclass of Paunovic's tactics, where people have thought that the way to get through the Championship is to full-on attack, score goals, like Blackburn are doing, who we've got coming up when you listen to this today, or if the game's already gone, whenever, when we play them. They're very much full-in attack, a non-Tony Mowbray team. As we all know, Mowbray's been well to be defence first and then attack second. But I think if you look at it and if you compare what Paunovic has been, where he's gone, this is a Diego Simone type of football, where if you don't score, then we will give it. We only need one chance. We only need one opportunity, and that's the way we're going. Do you really? So now you've seen it, and now we've become the only team to win and draw the first 7 games. And only 2 other teams have done it, and they've both been promoted first. Do you still think we will finish mid-table?
It's actually three teams.
Three
Two
teams.
before. The other team, I think, was Brighton, who finished third. But I still think Reading will slide very soon. Just because, as I say, creating those chances, it's not good enough. Defensively, I'll take the point that Reading have been brilliant defensively so far this season. They've been brilliant. Whether that lasts, we'll have to wait and see, because as we saw last season, Reading were fairly average defensively, weren't they? And
No, not average. We were shit.
There you go.
We were shit.
And we're quite often relying on Cabral coming to the rescue. So we could see those defensive fragilities pop up again. There's a lot of question marks I have about this Reading side, and I think there was also the fact that there were better teams than Reading this season. Watford and Bournemouth, I thought, might struggle this season, but they are starting to look like the real deal now, and the fact they kept hold of so many very good players, I think will start to show as the season goes on. Brentford, I still think, will end up having a good season, and then you've got the likes of Stoke and what have you.
I think Stoke will. I think Stoke will. I think Watford will. I think Bournemouth will do well. I don't think Brentford will. I think Brentford are doing a Brentford that I think people need to stop thinking our club need to do a Brentford. I think they do terrible way of doing business. They get their players up to a top level, sell them on, bring another player in, and then finish mid-table. Then get to the top and then fail again, sell their players and go down again. It's like you're not pushing your team to go forward. I don't agree with how Brentford do things, and I don't think they will do well this season. But let's talk about Reading coming up with the next game. So let's skip over Blackburn, because hopefully people would have watched this on the day of it or afterwards. We've got Coventry coming up. And then in November, we've got Preston, Stoke, Bournemouth, Millwall, Bristol. Bristol have had a very good start of the season. Millwall are just Millwall. Bournemouth will be a very tough task. Stoke will be very tough, because I really like their team this season. Without James McLean, if he's in it, then it's not a good team. And Preston North End as well. We always beat Preston, so it's one of those teams that I'm not too worried about Preston. Okay, so if Reading are still on this run, if Reading beat Bournemouth, will you hold your hands up and say Reading are the best team in the Championship?
No. The teams you were just reeling off there are all teams who I expect to be in or around the playoffs this season, apart from Coventry, and maybe to an extent Preston. It's a very tough run, very, very tough run. And if Reading come out of the other side of that at the end of November, smelling of roses, then that's when I will start saying, okay, maybe I have been wrong about this Reading side. Based on the past three games, though, I'm not too sure. The Blackburn game on Tuesday or today or whenever this goes out is going to be a very telling game, just because Blackburn have had they had a very good start, and then they started to wobble a bit, and then they picked up a very good win against Coventry at the weekend. So whether they look like they're getting back to form, and with their attacking prowess against Reading's defence, it's going to be very interesting to see the two forces collide. But as I say, the Coventry game on Saturday, I think, should be a Reading win, considering their form, because Coventry have been fairly bang average so far.
I think we're playing Friday night on Sky. I think that's been moved to. I think it's now been moved to Sky. So let's talk about Blackburn's form then. So they beat Coventry 4-0, lost to Watford, who Reading beat, lost to Nottingham Forest. How'd you do that? Blackburn also drew against Cardiff, who we beat Derby 4-0. Jesus, didn't even know that. And they beat Wickham 5-0 the very first game of the season. Do you really think Blackburn will give? Because if we look at Blackburn, they've got Harvey Elliott, who's just come in on loan from Liverpool, who everyone I think will want to drop kick by the amount of comments that I can see over social media with the hatred that he's got. I don't get the hatred for him, but I think he's a good player. Do you really consider Blackburn to really trouble that Reading defence?
I think Blackburn could be a surprise contender for a playoff contender this season, just because of the all-round squad that they've got. The attack is looking so good at the moment. Adam Armstrong is on fire. He's probably one of the most clinical finishers in the league. He's joint top scorer with Ivan Toney at the moment. Harvey Elliott, he's only played 2 games so far, but for a 17-year-old,
yeah, he's ridiculous.
We're starting to see how good a player he is. And then Ben Brereton as well, who's someone who a lot of Championship fans might not necessarily know as much about, but when he was a young lad, he showed loads of quality. He's never really got going at Blackburn, but then this season he's been superb against Coventry at the weekend. He was unbelievable.
Wasn't he the Nottingham Forest youngster?
Yeah, that's right.
Didn't he go with the under-20? Was he in the under-17s, the World Cup winning? Or was he the under-21s?
No,
he's always been with the under-21s, because I've always really rated him. I've always really thought highly of him as a player as well. But so if you could say, right, if you're looking at the team now, this Reading team, and you could mid-table, you say mid-table, who do you really think will, looking down in November's fixtures and coming up, if you could say one team that's really going to struggle, make Reading struggle, who's that team?
I imagine it'll probably... Wait, who are the teams again?
So we have got in November, Preston, Stoke, Bournemouth, Millwall, Bristol.
I mean, all of them could very well give Reading one hell of a game. And
apart from Preston,
apparently. The thing is, all it could take is one loss and it could all start going a bit topsy-turvy for Reading this season, based on how the games have gone so far and how performances have looked in the past 3 games. But Bournemouth are the one who stand out for me there, because as I was saying a minute ago, the fact they've managed to keep hold of the likes of Josh King, Jefferson Lerma, Chris Mepham, very good players at this level, and probably should be playing in the Premier League, is a madness for me. So if I had to pick out the strongest team out of those, then Bournemouth without a doubt.
And then they stole that Raquelme, but who is he anyway? From us. Okay, so that's the end of the Reddit chat, and I would like to have you on again once I've proved you wrong, just to rub now. But what I want to ask you as well is, this is non-Reading related. This is just you. And I asked this question before we come onto this podcast. And I'm going to ask you again, so that people that are watching and listening, how have you dealt with? I would call it. Yeah, I would actually call it the abuse that I think certain fans, I think Reading have really jumped on this, which Reading fans like to jump on it on Twitter. But I see Birmingham as well were not happy with certain comments that you made about them as well. Which, to be fair, I don't like Birmingham. So if they want Champions League football in 2 years' time, they need to sort themselves out, don't they? As their owner said. So how have you dealt with all of it?
After doing the podcast for a year and a bit, it doesn't really bother me too much anymore. When I first started doing the podcast and I was getting abuse from different fans, it affected me a bit. But now I've just kind of just take it on the chin. I've learned that whenever you criticize anyone's club, they just will get instantly upset. There'll always be some sets of fans who get instantly upset. And I know it's more about that than anything else. At the end of the day, most of the abuse is just name calling, and I mean, it's just words, isn't it? So, it doesn't really fuss me too much now. I still find it bizarre that people would go out their way to abuse people on social media.
Do you get DMs, abusive DMs? Okay.
Yeah. I've deleted most of them, otherwise I would have read some of them out to you. But again, I just delete them, and it's just name calling. So who really cares?
Yeah. No. It's just one of those things that, as a podcast, that what we try and do is just discuss mental health, and we do that every single episode that we do. So all I say to anyone that's listening, that's listened to all the way through and listen to this, if you can disagree with him and go, no, I don't agree with you, but blah blah blah. But just don't be an arsehole. I've said it before that I put on the post that they said about Reading, about with I think you said about Reading, and I said I don't agree with this. I think you've really got to watch a Reading game to understand it. And then the second one that come out, I said I have to get him on. I want to talk to him. I want people to know you, get to know you, so that there's not this people could they know who you are and what you're like and all this sort of stuff. So it's good to get to know you as well. So thank you for coming on. I hope we can get you on again in the near future, in a few weeks or a few months. Definitely want to get you on at the end of November, so that either I can come on here and start crying of sadness, or I could come on here and sort of brag how great we are.
Yeah, that's understandable.
So thank you ever so much for coming on. I know you've now got to go off and go do your thing. So thank you ever so much for coming on. And everyone that's watching or listening, this is the Tuesday of the day of the game. Don't forget, tomorrow on Wednesday, we are releasing our general podcast where we will be talking about Premier League, NFL, because that happened. That was mental over the weekend. WWE, because that was massive over the weekend as well. And we will be talking all things, any other Premier League as well. We will be discussing that as well tomorrow. And then we will be releasing one Thursday, which will be building up to the Coventry game on Friday and the weekend's events. So busy week for me and for Ryan, who will be on later on. Well, later on when I do this, but yesterday for you guys. So thank you ever so much for coming on, and we will see you guys whenever. Bye.